You're listening to XVGM Radio. Welcome to XVGM Radio, where the bits keep coming. I'm Mike.
And I'm Justin.
And this is episode 102, The Musical History of Natsume, Part 2.
Ooh, there's a lot of 2 in that.
A lot of 2. 102, Part 2, Too Cool for School.
Tutu wearing
Two rude dudes, two crude dudes. I don't know.
Terrible twos.
Terrible twos. Today we are looking at our musical history of Natsume. We are coming back to this after a couple episodes that we skipped on it. We did episode 99, where we covered the musical history of Natsume Part 1, which was mostly just like Natsume Inc.
Right. That covered them up to about the
Super Nintendo era.
Yeah, like mid-late 2000s.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, mid-late 90s.
Mid-late, yeah. It's like 95-ish, around there somewhere. So this time around, we are looking at the split, which happened in the mid-90s. So in like 1995, Natsume Inc. and Natsume Co. Limited split. And so we are specifically covering Natsume Inc. this time around. They are primarily a publisher for games that came out in North America. There were some that reached in Europe as well. But for the most part, all of these games released either only in North America by Natsume, or if they released elsewhere, they released under different publishers. They did have development of some games, but not all the games that we're featuring here are, like, most of them are published by, not developed.
Right. Yeah. There's really only a few things that were developed and published by Natsume, and I think we touch on a couple of those. But like you said, because the majority of the games that they were putting out were just things they were publishing, you're gonna hear from a number of different developers.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of their earlier stuff was a lot of RPGs, a lot of just licensed titles, but for the most part, they are very well known for the Harvest Moon series, which we'll be touching on briefly for a couple tracks as well. So buckle in, strap up, and grab your fishing rods, your farm gear. We're covering a lot of different stuff in this episode, and we've got some really awesome music that we're featuring, even though it wasn't created by Natsume specifically. It's all still really good stuff.
It's still in their library.
Yeah, exactly. And so today's opener, the intro track, was from a game called Highway 2000. This came out in I almost said 2000. No. This came out in 1996 on the Sega Saturn. And this was track 2. It's by Tease Music. More specifically, it's by Yasutaka Hatade, working for Tease Music. This game was also called Wangan Dead Heat in Japan. It released as well in Europe under the publisher JVC Musical Industries, and Japan's publisher was Pack-In Video.
Okay.
So yeah, the sound driver on this is the SCSP/CD-DA for that. It's an arcade racing game, and there's spread across 5 different courses, and you can apparently have female co-drivers, kind of like Outrun a little bit.
Oh,
in that aspect,
like co-drivers, sitting in the
sitting next
seat?
to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was that or if it was like on a headset.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, they're sitting right next to you. You're trying to impress them by finishing in first place, of course.
Oh.
So you can woo them, like, look how good I could drive, baby. Like, what? Okay. I've never gotten in a car with a woman and been like, want to see how fast I could drive? Be like, no, that's scary.
Yeah, I mean that's also not the culture that we grew up in.
True.
I'm sure there are people out there that love the thrill of that, but it's just odd hearing that the situation where the woman wants to see you finish first.
Oh, that's true.
We're gonna cut that.
Want. No, we're not. So, what's interesting though about the women in this game, there are Western ladies in the U.S. and I believe the European version, and there are Japanese ladies in the Japanese game. So they changed the. They actually
the nationality or the race. Yeah.
Here's a quick update. The North American version removes that co-driver feature. So the only way that you can play this game and have the lovely Western ladies is the PAL region.
Interesting.
Yeah, kind of wild there. But I mean, as far as the game itself goes, it's pretty rare. Like, it's pretty hard to find if you're getting it for the Saturn. I mean, we looked it up, and it's kind of hard to find. There's only one complete in-box copy of it on eBay currently. Everything else is loose discs, and there's very few of those. So, yeah, pretty wild. This music, though, awesome, right?
Rockin'. Like, yeah. I felt like this was the opener. Aside from being the opener to our episode, it felt like the opener to like a 90s action show.
Yes. Yeah. I'm expecting either like Pamela Anderson to run across the beach with a gun, or like, maybe some David Hasselhoff, or
I was thinking like one of those, I don't want to call them off-brand superhero shows, but basically, I mean, I don't know if you remember any of those shows like Nightman or Mantis.
Nightman?
Or
like Dayman, Nightman?
Maybe it wasn't Nightman, but I'm pretty sure it was. There was a superhero show in the 90s.
Fighter of the Nightman.
Yeah, Nightman television series.
Oh, okay then. Well,
but he was the good guy.
Oh,
he was like an inverse Batman. Like his villain was very rich and was able to throw money around. And he was a more modest person with some powers. I think he had like telepathy or something.
So it's like a gargoyles thing. Got it.
Yeah. Xanadu.
Yeah. Xanadu? Xanatos.
That's what I said.
Yes. No, it's Xanadu. Xanadu. Anyways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is a racing game, 5 courses that you can play. It looks pretty basic. I mean, just based on the gameplay. I mean, it looks nice, but it just looks pretty, meh. I don't know.
It sounds great.
It sounds awesome. Like, I'd love to get it just to play it, to listen to these tunes, because they're great. So the whole soundtrack is awesome. It's one of those soundtracks that was like, ooh, maybe we do a full episode on this, but I was like, let's just dive into one track. So that's pretty much it. The composer,
what about Yasutaka?
Yasutaka, we've talked about Tease Music before. So Yasutaka Hatade is credited on a bunch of stuff, starting off with Art of Fighting for the TurboGrafx CD in 1994, and then jumping around here, F1 Challenge on the Sega Saturn, Bogey Dead 6 on the PlayStation in 96, Evil Zone, which has a great soundtrack. It's a fighting game. Time Stalkers on the Dreamcast, just like the list kind of goes on, but stops in 2016. Last game that they did music for was Cyber Danganronpa VR, The Clash Trial.
Interesting.
Yeah. So There's some stuff in between there as well, but it's not a huge list. Just a couple random games, but all under T's music. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, good stuff. I really enjoyed this track. I really love that helicopter coming in while the guitar is kind of almost mimicking what's going on with the helicopter, like, and then you've got like the guitar kind of going like it was cool. It was very neat. Yeah, that was a terrible impression. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. That was
a terrible impression of both a helicopter and a guitar. I fail on both counts.
Question of the fans, which was which?
Yeah, let us know in the comments, on Discord, Twitter, I don't know, smoke signals, let us know. which was a worse impression.
No, which one was which?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Legend of the River King 2 is our next track. This is my first pick of the show. This is on the Game Boy Color. This came out in 1999. And this track is called Fish on Hook, and it's by an unknown composer. Ooh. Thanks for joining us back on our musical history of Natsume Part 2. And that was Legend of the River King 2. Ooh. The Game Boy Color game that came out in 1999 that was by an unknown composer, and that little ditty was Fish on Hook. I love the frantic energy of this, which it kind of starts off a little stuttery initially, you know, with the music, but I love this Japanese kind of instrumentation vibe and sound to it. It really sounds very, very Japanese with that. It's like those runs that you're hearing are very, like, I've heard that in so many different like ninja games, stuff like Mystical Ninja. Okay. Like it's got that like ninja sound that, you know, a lot of like games that come from Japan kind of feature when they are originating during a time of that era of like ye olden, you know, Japanese time.
Ye olden Japanese time.
Yeah.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the franticness at the beginning. And I don't know if it was a stuttering or what it was, but I got a bit thrown off. And it felt very kind of muddled to me as it got into the middle. It kind of came out of that towards the end, but like the beginning and the end is not enough for me to like go all in.
Okay. Okay.
But I will say I didn't recognize that as kind of a Japanese thing.
Oh, interesting.
The note progression kind of reminded me of some things you'd hear in like Egyptian or Middle Eastern music. Oh, but okay. But when you mention like the ninja games, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I could see that as well. When I was listening to it at first, I got just, like I said, kind of Middle Eastern off of some of that, which can kind of account for, not that I don't like Middle Eastern music, but that kind of accounts for some of like what I wasn't kind of grasping in the middle because, like I said, it got a little bit muddled. It got a little like frantic with just a lot of notes being thrown at me, and I guess kind of got a little bit overwhelmed. But I don't know, maybe subsequent listens might reveal more that I like about it. But at the moment, I don't think it's a bad song. It was not what I was expecting, especially from a game called Legend of the River King.
So this game is like a fishing RPG.
Yes.
And you're going around as this kid you could be a kid or a teenager, I believe, in this. And you're just kind of going around capturing fish. There's also like a bug element too, like you can capture bugs and look at bugs and stuff like that too. So I don't know if maybe you're using some of the bugs as like bait and stuff like that, maybe like trying to find worms. So I haven't played this one, but it looks pretty interesting. I don't know if this kind of game is for me personally, but man, I love this soundtrack. There's a ton of really, really excellent music in this game. A lot of like tracks that kind of sound Mega Man-ish as well. So if you're into that sort of like action-y type, I mean, it also has like RPG type of music too, like town music and stuff like that. Right. But yeah, it was developed by Victor Interactive Software and published by Natsume. It is the second game in the series to be published on the Game Boy Color, and you can actually link it up with the Harvest Moon Game Boy Color 2 game via link cable. You could also link it up with a transfer pack in the Japanese version of Nushi Tsuri 64 Shiokaze Ninote. So, yeah, I don't know. It's got some extra stuff that you can like unlock and do, which is cool. So, yeah. Unfortunately, no composer on this one. There's actually a lot of tracks on this episode where there's going to be an unknown composer.
Yeah, I noticed that actually.
I don't know why, but like a lot of these developers are like either not as well known or they just didn't keep very good records of who did what.
Yeah.
I did try looking the game's credits, just couldn't find anything. There are credits there, but just nothing for music, so it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, same thing about, because I've got a few games where I just don't have a composer, and I looked in a few different places, and again, they're just not in the credits. So
Natsume is very clearly just like kind of taking this game and, you know, distributing it because it fits with, you know, some of the other games that they're putting out with the Harvest Moon series. So they're probably thinking, hey, if you like Harvest Moon, you might also like a fishing, you know, RPG. So,
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I dig it. It's cool, and we can move on.
Fair enough. All right, so I'm going to play a track from a game that came out in 1999 on the Game Boy Color. This is called Hole-in-One Golf. This one was developed by Natsume, so there's one for them there. And the track is called BGM number 01, and this is another one with an unknown composer. Welcome back. That was Hole-in-One Golf, the 1999 game from the Game Boy Color. The track was BGM number 01, and we have just learned, after searching a few more websites, I did find this looks like it was composed by Iku Mizutani. So let's give credit to the man.
My man's Iku Mizutani. I will say this. I didn't listen to any of Justin's tracks beforehand. Otherwise, I would have messaged him and be like, dude, that's totally Mizutani. I mean, like, how could you not, like, I would have been shocked to find out that it was. If it wasn't Mizutani, it would have been like Hiroyuki Iwatsuki.
Yeah,
that's the only person that has that tone, that sound. But even so, Mizutani was doing a ton of Game Boy Color games, most of which we're going to be talking about on the episode part 3, which will come in sometime in the near future, sometime this year. And that was with Natsume Inc., who continued developing for the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, a lot of handheld stuff. In fact, this entire episode, this one that we're talking about today, part 2, is full of almost nothing but handheld games. They were cheap, they were easy to develop for those companies, they knew the hardware, they probably worked with some of the other developers. So, like, yeah, most of the stuff on this episode is all handheld stuff.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that. Yeah. There's only 3 tracks on here that I see that are consoles.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just because Natsume Inc. knew how to work with developers to, publish games that were cheap and easy to put out. So they knew that, hey, if we're going to try to make some money as a publisher, we need to, take on all these third parties. But just because their relationship stopped with developing specifically doesn't mean that they didn't still work with Natsume Inc. from time to time. Right. Yeah.
And like I said, there's a few of those in here.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, this track, so I will say, it does. The rest of the soundtrack, not that it's bad, but like this is my favorite song on the soundtrack. Okay. I think the last song on it is also pretty good, but a lot of the other ones, so for one, this came from a golf game, hole-in-one golf.
Yeah.
This does not feel to me like a golf song. Like,
no,
I could not concentrate on golfing.
You'd be too busy rocking out.
You'd be too busy dancing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Some of the other tracks are a little bit more, I don't know if I'd say golf-centric, because, like, what's golf music? But they are a bit more low-key, something you'd more kind of expect to hear while trying to concentrate while golfing.
I can already picture the music in my head, and I'm sure it's just, like, very like basic for Mizutani, very like da 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 it's probably that type of like borderline RPG travel music, that sort of stuff that he's really good at doing. So I can already hear it in my head, and it's awesome. So this one was great to hear. Looks like I gotta go hunt this one down to add to my Mizutani collection. If you look in my Game Boy collection, I just have almost nothing. Like, I have a ton of, like, great games in there, but, like, there's so many games in there that I bought just for Mizutani soundtracks. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a whole lot about the game. The best information I found was actually on one of my old standbys, GameFAQs.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, it seems to be just a standard golf game, 18 holes of fun-filled surprise and exciting gameplay.
That's what she said.
Nice. Whether you're a master or just starting to swing a club, hole-in-one golf is a solid hit. But yeah, the features of the game are things like stroke play, tournament play.
Gross.
And then there are special characters that'll help you. And there are 3 different courses. So for a Game Boy Color game,
that's not a lot.
Well, I mean,
3 different courses?
3 courses times 18 holes a course.
Oh, okay, yeah. I guess that kind of evens out.
Yeah.
This game does have a Rumble Pack feature, actually.
I was just going to say Rumble built in, and it comes with a AAA battery. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Could save that $1.50 on one AAA battery. Yeah, there were a bunch of Game Boy Color games that had battery features that, there was like Little Mermaid Pinball, there was Perfect Dark. There's a number of games that came with, and the boxes were usually a little bigger too. Yeah. There were 2 different Pokemon pinball games, I think. One didn't come with a battery and one did, if I recall correctly. Okay. So
yeah, Perfect Dark I definitely remember.
Yeah. Cool.
Nice.
I would like to check this game out. It sounds like, a relaxing golf game that, could... I'm sure it's nowhere near as good as, like, Mario Golf on the Game Boy Color, which actually does have, like, an RPG mode and everything. It's like a very in-depth game that Nintendo put out. on the Game Boy Color, but I don't know. This one sounds good, so I may have to pick it up.
Yeah. And Ikki Mizutani, we've talked about a ton on the podcast before, so just...
Wait, we did?
At some point.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I mean, almost all of episode 99, so go check that out.
Oh, that's true, too.
Yeah, so I don't think we need to really talk too much about him, because we did a whole episode on him.
Yeah, and it's part 1 of this, so if you're starting at part 2, stop, go back, listen to part 1.
Yes. All right, I'm going to move into my next pick. It was tough picking tracks for this one because the whole soundtrack is great from start to finish. This is Lufia, The Legend Returns. This came out in the Game Boy Color in 2001. This track is called To Doom Island with 2 exclamation points at the end.
Oh.
Yeah, so you know they mean business. It's by Yasunori Shiono, Akiko Ishibashi, and Tomoko Morita. Thanks for joining us back on episode 102, the musical history of Natsume Part 2. And that was Lufia, The Legend Returns, not a Part 2, for the record. That was the Game Boy Color game that came out in 2001, and that was To Doom Island by Yasunori Shiono, Akiko Ishibashi, and Tomoko Morita. What are your thoughts on this one?
Something about the melody here seemed really familiar, and I don't know why. Like, I can't place it, but that melody line, this song itself felt very familiar.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know why. I've never played this game. I've never seen this game in my life, I swear.
Have you played any Lufia games before? That might be why.
Honestly, no. I've watched friends play them, but I've never owned any of the Lufia games and played them myself.
So, a little bit of backstory on this one. So, this is the third game in the franchise of Lufia, and chronologically, it is the sequel to the first game. So what they did was Lufia and the Fortress of Doom came out first. That is a Super NES game. That one was the first game, and then after that, they came out with Lufia 2 Rise of the Sinistrals, and that was a Natsume Inc. published game. Okay, so that was one of the first games that, when the split happened, that's one of the first games that they published. And after that, there was a game that was being developed called Lufia Ruins Chaser, and it was going to be called Lufia 3 Ruins Chaser. That game they were working on for a while, and then all of a sudden Nihon Flex, which was the company that was working on it, went out of business. So the original developer of the Lufia series, Neverland, grabbed the game and basically downported it to the Game Boy Color and then released it through Natsume. So that's kind of how it all came about. There's a lot of stuff that was cut from this game too, like a couple different characters that were supposed to be in the final story but weren't. I don't know why, but there's like a half vampire named Berea. There's a girl who's going to be who wanted to be an idol named Chelsea, and then Panapas, who's an artist. So a precocious one at that.
They just never made it into the game.
That's it. This one takes place 100 years after the first game, but 200 years after Lufia 2, because Lufia 2 is a prequel. So it's 200 years after the events of Lufia 2, and 100 years after
Lufia 1.
Right. So that's kind of how it went down. The plot of the game is you play as one of the hero from the previous game, Maxim, one of his descendants. Whose name is Wayne. Like W-A-I-N, not Wayne like Wayne's World. Yeah. Basically, he's like a swordsman warrior guy, and this woman shows up in the village that he lives in, and she's like, hey, I need a swordsman. And she meets him, and then he's like, I'm our best warrior in the town. And she's like, cool, you're terrible. And then she pieces out and tries to look for somebody else. Meanwhile, he's like, well, I'm going to go fight a bunch of monsters. And that's kind of the beginning of the game. She's basically trying to, her name is Serena, I believe. And she's trying to grab whatever warrior she could find to join her on her journey to stop the great evil in the game. That's basically as far as I could get. Yeah, so that's pretty much the game. There's a little bit more in detail to the combat specifically. I don't want to bore people, but the game uses the same system, the IP system that was used in previous games, where special skills aren't tied to any kind of like character equipment that you would normally put stuff like that on. Yeah, you can gain new abilities called IP skills. The way that you gain them is you have to find these secret scrolls that are like hidden in dungeons and stuff like that. There's some exclusive stuff to this game as well in terms of the combat and finding like additional skills, like having a fourth skill instead of not. But one of the reasons why I asked if you had played any other Lufia games is because there is some music that I don't know how much returns from previous games in the series, but one of the best tracks in this game is also, it's like in the beginning when they're explaining everything in the prologue, I believe, and that's when this song plays. It's like not this song, but like there's another song that is directly from Lufia 2, and I believe it's the final encounter from Lufia 2.
Oh, wow.
So, and it's a tremendously awesome track, and it honestly sounds the best of all the tracks, even better than this one that we heard just now, which is a very epic kind of song, but it just, I don't know what it is about that song, but that song in particular, which I was going to play, but I didn't want to play something that was from Lufia 2. I wanted to play something that was unique to this game. Right. But it's really weird because it's like all the rest of the music in this game kind of sounds like a little bit tinnier in quality than that one track. Like that one track they must have used something special in terms of the way that the track was created or developed. I don't know, but like if you go and listen to that track on like any YouTube, Cage Insider, whatever you're going to use to listen to music, you're going to hear it and be like, whoa, this prologue track is like epic. It's like super good. And then you listen to the rest of the music and it's like, this is okay. It's not as good as that track.
Yeah.
It's weird. Yeah.
Interesting decisions.
Yeah. There's a little bit of dispute in terms of the composers, though. So I mentioned that Yasunori Shiono, Akiko Ishibashi, and Tomoko Morita are all attached to this one, but Yukio Nakajima is also attached in some, places. But the primary source of music that we use did not quote them, Yukio, as being a composer. So just kind of take it with a grain of salt. That some places say Yukio, other places don't.
Okay.
Yeah. Speaking Speaking of Yukio Nakajima, the first game that they did was Hat Trick Hero 2 for the Super NES. And then Disney's Party on the GameCube in 2002. I'm, of course, skipping. Final game that they covered is Rune Factory 5, which came out in 2022 on Windows. They did sound effects for that. Composer-wise, I'm seeing Puzzle and Dragons on the iPad in 2012. But they did some other games like Lufia Curse of the Sinistrals, which is a remake of Lufia 2, Rise of the Sinistrals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's on the DS, so pretty neat game there. As for the other composers, Yasunori Shiono started off with Miracle Ropit's Adventure in 2100 on the NES in 1987. That's gotta be a Famicom game, because I've never heard of Miracle Ropit's Adventure in 2100 coming out in the US. Followed it up with Gaudi, Barcelona no Kaze in 1989 for the PC-88. And they did a couple of Genesis games like Final Zone, did games for the Sharp X68000 like Granada, lots of different stuff, but they're primarily a Lufia composer. They worked on almost every Lufia game up till the remake for Curse of the Sinistrals. Or rather, the remake of Rise of the Sinistrals, which is Curse of the Sinistrals.
Right.
Akiko Ishibashi, only 4 games listed. Record of Lodos War on the Dreamcast back in 2000. This game, Disney's Party, again on the GameCube, and Fushigi no Dungeon Furai no Shirin Gaiden Jokenji Asuka Kenzen, which also came out on the Dreamcast, and then that's it, they disappeared. Tomoko Morita is our final composer on this one. They started off also with Record of Lotus War back in 2000, and then after following it up with Lufia, the Disney's Party game, they worked on some other games that we're going to be talking about later today. Big time on Rune Factory, apparently. A lot of Rune Factory games in their list. Including the final game that they composed for, which was Rune Factory 5, which was a Windows game exclusive. 2022 is the year of release on that one. Lots of in-between stuff there, but mostly Rune Factory.
Yeah.
All right, what do you got for us?
All right, so I'm going to be going into one of our console games. This is going to be from the GameCube. It came out in 2003. The title of the game is Metabots Infinity. The track is Game Over, and so it was composed by Kinuyo Yamashita, and it looks like Iku Mizutani did arrangement on the game.
Cool.
Hey there, that was Metabots Infinity with Game Over. It came out on the GameCube in 2003, and the composer was Kinuyo Yamashita, with Iku Mizutani listed as a ranger on the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, this is definitely a lot more laid back, but Iku Mizutani's a guitarist, so I've seen him play in bands and stuff like that, like on, his Facebook and yeah. So it makes sense that he would arrange this one.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe she composed it and he played it.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I mean, she's a pianist, so that's that's a very good point. She probably keyed it all out and then he guitared it all out.
Yeah. This one I heard and was like, wow, this is the game over screen. I wouldn't mind dying in the game. Like it's not bad. Like it's kind of chill. It's not like super upbeat. Like it's not crazy or anything, but it's definitely not. I'm trying to think of other game over screens, and it's usually either musicless or it's just like some chords. Like the first thing that comes to mind is Symphony of the Night.
Sure.
Like you get that laughing and that melting screen.
Right.
So hearing this at a game over screen, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's very laid back, very relaxed, but also kind of like a jazzy. It's like a mix between like a hard rock vibe and a jazz vibe. It's very strange, but I really liked it. It was good.
Yeah.
That's kind of the problem with Natsume is they make these tracks that are like either game over or continue tracks, and a lot of the times they don't get fully fleshed out and played in the game.
Yeah, because nobody sits at a game over screen. I want to get back into the game.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is another Natsume game called Action Man Search for Base X, which came out in the Game Boy Color, and that's a Niku Mizutani jam. And the continue song is great because you could just sit there and listen to it over and over and over again. But then the track that plays when you are starting a level, there's a little short cutscene at the beginning of each level, and that, for whatever reason, cuts out. Like, it plays like a couple notes and then it cuts out. And the track goes on and on and on. So it's kind of weird that happens.
Yeah. You touched on something I forgot to mention, actually. This was another game developed and published by Natsume.
Yes, yeah. The Metabots games are pretty well known for being Kinuyo Yamashita soundtracks. So, she did the Game Boy Advance game, and I think there might be Game Boy Color games too. I can't remember. Maybe not.
Yeah, no, I think so, because the game started way back in like 1997, which I think is when the anime ended. So this is based off of a property. There's a manga. Oh, I'm sorry, not the anime. The manga went from 1997 to 1999. Yeah. And then there was another manga. So I don't think that it's still going on, but it definitely went for a while.
It's essentially just like robot Pokemon, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Oh no, there is a current manga called Metabot Reloaded.
Ooh, okay.
Which I guess it must be a sequel to Metabot Reloaded.
I've never seen Metabots. I don't know anything about it. All I know is that it's basically like, kind of like Digimon.
Yeah, it's like robot Pokemon. So like there's robots. The robots are artificially intelligent, but they tend to like work with a human. And the main human's name in this game series, or possibly in the show too, is named as Iki Tenryu. Okay. And his Metabot is known as Meta Bee, which is a portmanteau of metal and beetle. Oh, okay. So it's not a bee, it's a metal beetle, which you'll lose a little bit of that in English, I think.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
But, Meta Bee is described as an anti-hero, and this is definitely like a kid's show. So I'm kind of curious how you work an anti-hero into a kid's show, because usually you think of anti-hero and it's someone who does the right thing, but not always the right way. Usually involves killing bad guys, like the Punisher, Deadpool, Venom.
Right.
So I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure this Meta Bee isn't going around killing other people, but whatever. Anti-hero of a kid series.
Yeah.
But yeah, the series has been going on for a long time. There are a lot of video game entries in the main series and spin-offs. This is considered a side game, even though it's on a console. Usually you'd think, the console has the main games and the spin-offs and side games are on a handheld. Yeah. This seems to be, well, I shouldn't say it's the other way around, but to me, it kind of seems to be the other way around, because the first Metabot game is on the Game Boy. We've got Game Boy, Wonder Swan, Game Boy Color, Nintendo DS. Okay. And this is all for the main series. And then we get to the spin-offs and whatnot. Still Game Boy Color, PlayStation, GB Color. It's
series kind of continued. Probably stayed in Japan for the most part.
Yeah, this is very largely a Japan game with a handful of EU and North America releases. Okay. But yeah, this was one of the games, Metabots Infinity, that was released stateside.
Yeah, this just kind of reeks of early 2000s anime,
It does.
A lot of that, like, gotta catch 'em all kind of stuff because Pokemon was so big. Everybody like you had Digimon, Monster Rancher,
technically
Yu-Gi-Oh.
Digimon came first.
Well, okay, but Digimon, Monster Rancher. What was some of the other ones? Yu-Gi-Oh. Well, Yu-Gi-Oh is more card battles, but
yeah,
you get my point.
It still has that feel of like you need to get the cards,
right?
And
got to catch them all. It's got the catch them all
fight
vibe.
The guys,
yeah. As far as the plot goes, the Riverview City kids have gone missing.
Yep.
Or some of them have. Icky suspects that the Rubber Oboe gang is responsible.
Yep.
So it's up to him and his Metal Bee to stop them. So
Metal Beetle.
Metal Beetle,
yes,
sorry.
Yes. Apparently this game was not great.
Yeah, it got pretty bad reviews.
Yeah, absolutely lambasted.
Yeah.
So it seems to be fairly standard in the series. Not that it was a poor game at the gameplay. It's divided. You've got an overworld where you can run around, and then from the overworld you go to different arenas. And there are two types of missions in the arenas where you can either do row battling all of the enemies or row battle one-on-one. So it likely didn't do well because it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of range in what's going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting little game. The music was pretty good. Most of the soundtrack, it's not bad, but it's not really what I would have expected out of this type of a game.
Sure.
Like you listen to the music from the Pokemon games, the Digimon games, or games from this kind of genre, and there's a lot of variance, but it tends to be kind of high energy and like battle music and stuff. And a lot of the music here mostly felt low energy to me. Whether it was a boss battle, a regular battle, a town theme, or whatever, there was a lot of just kind of low energy and kind of chill, like this game over track.
Yeah.
And the game over track was just the one that gripped me because it is a game over track, and it just sounded really, really cool and jazzy.
Maybe they wrote like a fishing game soundtrack and then just plopped it onto this. Who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, we don't really need to talk about Kinuyo Yamashita or Iku Mizutani because we covered them extensively in episode 99.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what do you got next?
All right. I'm going to go to the Game Boy Advance for this next track. It's from the year 2003, and this track is called The Final Decisive Battle, and it's from a game called Sema the Enemy. And this was composed by Tomoko Morita, Yasunori Shiono, and Yukio Nakajima.
XVGM Radio, where the bits just keep coming.
All right, you are back, and that was Cima, the enemy. Cima is spelled C-I-M-A. Yeah. That's a Game Boy Advance game that came out in 2003, and that track was by Tomoko Morita, Yasunori Shiono, and Yukio Nakajima, and it's called The Final Decisive Battle, and it certainly feels that way.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. I mean, I like this song, and I also dislike this song.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I picked it because it was very interesting. The whole track is like a stop, go, stop, go, stop, go.
Yeah.
So the transitions between those bits is very difficult. It's like a full stop, full speed ahead. And so I don't like it in that aspect.
I get what you're saying. One of the things I wrote down is very frantic, then you hit a brick wall.
Yeah. And there's parts of the song I really just kind of get bored with. The later part of the track where it's just do 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 ba do 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 ba do ba. You've got these very flat, like kind of horns in the background throughout the track, off and on. Even when the track is really going like full speed ahead with the the more like Castlevania kind of Baroque era type stuff that I loved. I love that part, but even in the background there, you hear like really kind of flat sounding horns, just like it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I know it's Game Boy Advance, and I know that like it's just very poor in that aspect. There's not a lot of really amazing sounding Game Boy Advance music. Compositions are great, but sound-wise, it kind of sounds very farty, very kind of bland at points. So, there are people who did amazing stuff with the Game Boy Advance, like Manfred Linsner.
Yeah, we've played some really good GBA stuff on the show before.
For sure.
Yeah, this was you basically touched on all the things that I was going to touch on. I had Baroque-ish written down. Like, does Mike think this is Castlevania? But one of the things, and I think this might be something that you were kind of alluding to as well, like those horns, they're a little bit flat, but one of the things that sort of killed it for me was it must be a trombone type thing, because it slides down and it slides through this dissonance that's kind of interesting, but the problem is the song itself isn't interesting enough to make me want to care about that dissonance.
So would you say that part represents a giant frown for you?
Sure.
Because all you do, you're listening to it and you're like, yeah, this is cool. And then all I picture is you just going, start frowning.
I guess you could say that.
Yeah. I love that part, personally.
It is an interesting song, and like I said, I like what they were going with there. I just feel like they could have done more around that to make this song as a whole better, and then I would have felt that it was more deserving of that neat little bit of dissonance.
I mean, I feel like what that part represents, for the most part, is a change of guard for the song, where it's going from this more slower aspect to it and ramping down but up at the same time. So you've got that part ending that's represented by the and then the other part coming up with the it reminded me a lot of Arcus Odyssey. It was the opening of Arcus Odyssey on the Sega Genesis. It had a lot of moments that felt very cinematic in that aspect. So to me, that's one of the standout parts of the track. But that's interesting that we kind of looked at it different ways. I don't know too much about this game. I've never played it. It really kind of feels like Neverland, the developer, was basically like, hey, let's make a new Lufia game, but make it not at all like Lufia. That's the vibe that I'm getting. I mean, the art style and everything is very much like, sword and sorcery type of stuff. But it also kind of feels futuristic, too. The composers, I mean, we already talked about Tomoko Morita, Yasunori Shiono we also talked about, and so did we do Yukio Nakajima, who was that composer that we added onto the Lufia Legend Returns track. So basically, these are composers from Neverland, that development company who made the Lufia games.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So normally what we do is we jump to Justin, but because we're doing what we did in episode 99, we are doing this chronologically in terms of our picks. So I'm going again. Don't worry, Justin will have a double pick a little later. So the next track is from Hi Hamtaro Ham Challenge. This is a DS game that came out in 2008. This track is called Bijou's Mixed Juice Stand, and it is by, unfortunately, an unknown composer. Hi there, I'm Serbia Steve, owner and proprietor of Serbia Steve's farming equipment. Have you got a quench for tilling? How about tiling? Replace all your weed-infested backyardings with luscious tiled floor that's so sparkling you could drink off of it. Are you in the market for fresh produce? We have new nocturnal plant bulbs that are harvested by the moon. Just shove them shubberings into the ground and what have you. Pour special night water on them and watch them blossom in days with the power of the moon. What's that? Want to grow cats and get married? Oh, we do too. So come on down to Serbia Steve's farming equipment where everyone's air is free. So come on down to, wait, I already said that. Join us at El Marie Ford.
Don't worry, Steve, I got this. Please note, all Florida residents are charged an extra 20% fee for a very specific reason. Sale of ginger is prohibited as Steve is allergic. Radish bulbs are on sale for just 2 cents a pop. Get them while they're hot. Utah residents, we're watching you. No CODs.
Oh boy, that was Hi Hamtaro, Little Hamster's Big Adventures, also known as Ham Challenge, also known as Hi Hamtaro, Little Hamster's Big Adventures Ham Training in the UK, also known as in Japanese, Totoko Hamutaro Hi Hamo-chan's no Hamo Challenge Atsumare Hi.
It's a lot of names.
That's a lot of names for one silly little hamster game. This came out in the DS in 2008, and that crack was not Biju's Mixed Juice Salad, as Justin thought it was during the break, but Biju's Mixed Juice Stand by an unknown composer.
I can't believe you'd call me out like that.
I had to. Mixed juice salad.
Yeah, that's what my brain kept saying until you said it.
I get it.
But yeah, this is super, super cute. I mean, just like the Hamtaro anime, kids show, whatever it is, super cute. It is exactly the kind of music I would expect to come out of a Hamtaro game.
This is a very like old-timey kind of track. I'm just picturing like a organ grinder, like turning a grinding wheel
like
thing, and
and
the music starts playing. So that's the vibe I got from this one. But it's a fun, silly track. I don't know. I feel like they really could have taken advantage of the DS and like thrown in some PCM samples. In the music. Like I was expecting like a whistle, like woo, somewhere in there.
It's definitely a woo.
Definitely a woo. So Alpha Dream Corporation developed this one. Natsume published it, of course. As far as the releases go, I could only find the North American release, but in terms of the publisher, but I don't know. I don't think the Japanese version or the European version was published by Natsume, but I have no idea. So not really important. This game is an educational game, like a brain training game. I think it's maybe a little bit different than Brain Age or whatever, but basically it's to develop kids' memory and math skills, word comprehension. There's 12 different games that they can do this with, and parents can actually check out how their kid's doing in the game and like adjust the level so that, if the kids are struggling in one aspect, they can, So it might be a good idea to grab for my kiddos. I have not shown my kids Hamtaro. I have barely seen Hamtaro. I saw it like years and years and years ago and thought it was a cute little show, but it's like basically a bunch of hamsters with big eyes and being all cutesy and dopey and silly. And
I've only seen a handful of things here and there. I mean, when it comes to shows in that regard, I much prefer like Samurai Pizza Cats.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's definitely more depth with a show like Samurai Pizza Cats. It's, I know it's a show about 3 samurai cats that work in a pizzeria and fight bad guys, evil bad bird or whatever. But, it's cheesy, it's corny, as far as Hamtaro goes. It's super goofy. It has a serious dedicated fan base of people that grew up during that era. I remember my brother watching this a lot. Yeah, because my brother's 7 years younger than me. So he was born in 90. And so when this came out, this was right around like when Pokemon was on and stuff like that. So he would watch this, he would watch Pokemon, and all that type of stuff. So yeah, it's pretty big with the youth.
The youth. Fair enough.
Yeah. I don't know who Bijou is, but I'm assuming that their mixed
another
juice...
hamster.
Oh, it is another hamster? Okay. Well, I'm assuming that their mixed juice stand is very delicious.
I hope so. Otherwise...
Otherwise, you're out of job, Bijou. Get out. Take your stuff with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No composer info on this one, so we can move on to your next pick, which is going to start us off on our Harvest Moon adventures.
Somewhat, yeah. So we're going to go to Harvest Moon, Hero of Leaf Valley. This came out on the PSP in 2010. The track is called Mining, and unfortunately, this is another unknown composition. Hey, welcome back. That was Harvest Moon, Hero of Leaf Valley, the 2010 PSP game composed by an unknown person, and the track was called Mining.
Definitely not Iku Mizutani.
No, does not feel like Iku Mizutani at all.
No.
In fact, I don't think Iku Mizutani was anywhere near the Harvest Moon game.
No, but I definitely do get mining from this track, so that makes sense.
Yeah. The sounds that they use really do kind of evoke being in a mine, if that makes any sense.
No, it does.
I mean, like the bells, like it feels very like twinkly and crystally.
Yeah. This reminds me a lot of something you might hear in like a Donkey Kong Country game, actually, like a mining level.
Okay, yeah.
The use of sound effects in the music is very well known for being in like Donkey Kong Country. So hearing all those like, almost like percussive elements to those sound effects, it's really cool.
Yeah, there were definitely instruments in there, but a lot of the stuff in there feels more organic. Like it doesn't feel like a song composed of traditional instruments. It feels like a song composed of either like instruments kind of like made out of whatever's lying around. Like
okay. Like stomp.
Yeah, kind of, that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is, I don't think we played any Harvest Moon tracks in the last episode.
I don't think we played any Harvest Moon tracks, period.
Ever.
In
102 episodes.
Yeah, so this is a first.
This is a first. Yeah. The series itself goes back to 1996 on the SNES.
Yeah.
And continues to this day in multiple ways. We'll talk more about that because we have some more Harvest Moon / Story of Seasons tracks to come up.
Yeah.
But, you know,
we could have done a whole episode on just Harvest Moon, but
we could have.
What's the fun in that?
Damn, we're going to get some angry letters for that comment. But
no, it's all good. I mean, like, they are definitely games that people love and appreciate, and we wanted to make sure that they're covered. So,
yeah. And they do have some varying music, which, like I said, we'll get to at some later tracks. But I mean, the title theme tends to be a little bit more upbeat. I picked this one specifically off of this game because I liked the feel of it. So all of these games tend to do, music for the summer, music for the different seasons, as well as different areas, because there are often different areas that you can farm in. So there's a lot of variation on a lot of the stuff. And then this kind of stood out because it was unique. A lot of the seasonal songs, like, it's one song or one theme, and they change the instruments, or they'll change like how it feels or how it sounds in different areas. And this is just like the mining is mining, as they would say.
Yes.
But yeah, Harvest Moon, farming and getting married simulator, I guess.
Right.
Most of the games, I think, follow a very similar story where you are coming to a town to start a farm or to take over a farm from a family member, and you have to till the fields, plant the crops, tend the crops, harvest them, sell them, and so on, and you keep going, and eventually there is a point where you can pick a partner. You can often, choose to have a family or have pets, although that might be more of a modern thing where you can choose to have pets instead of children.
Yes.
But yeah, Stardew Valley owes a lot to these games. A lot of the farming simulators or those type of simulator games, I mean, not that this was the first of its kind, but it is definitely the most popular.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, this was what put that sort of type of game on the map.
Yes.
For sure.
100%.
Yeah. One thing that's really cool about Natsume Inc. is that they have their own eBay store. Did you know that?
I didn't,
yeah.
Actually. Huh.
And they sell all sorts of cool stuff on their eBay store. I don't know about now, but when they, like a couple of years ago, they were selling sealed copies of Super Nintendo games, like Lufia.
Oh, wow.
That's like stuff they found in their warehouse. They're just like, oh, here. And they're just like selling it. And the games were going for insane prices because people were like, oh my God, a sealed copy of like Harvest Moon, sealed copies of, Ninja Warriors, like all sorts of like Natsume released games that were published by them or developed by them, and they just had a stockpile. So it was like this massive undigging of a bunch of games that fetched for pretty high prices, notably so.
Very cool. Yeah. They were able to find that stuff and then get it back out there.
Yeah, it's always neat when publishers do that. Square Enix was doing that too for a while on their website, where they were selling like PlayStation games for like, and they were basically like reprints that they were doing for like, that they held on to forever.
All right, what do you got for us?
All right, so I'm going back off of Harvest Moon for a bit. So this is actually my final track of the episode. Justin's going to close us out with 2 after this. This is Gabrielle's Ghostly Groove 3D. This is a 3DS game that came out in 2011. This track goes by DNC08, and this is by Beat Maniac Inc., and more specifically, Takane Okubo. Oh man, clap, clap, snap. We are back. That was Gabrielle's Ghostly Groove 3D, which was a 3DS game that came out in 2011. And that track was DNC08 by Beatmaniac Inc. and Takane Okubo. I couldn't find any info on Beatmaniac Inc. So we'll talk about Takane Okubo in a bit. This is a pretty fun track. I love the snaps and the woo!
Yeah, wow!
Wow! Yeah, that was great.
I was like, I didn't realize they got Charles Martinet to voice.
Whoa! Let's go! Yeah. Good stuff. This was developed by Santa Entertainment. No relation to Santa Claus. I don't think Santa Claus has his own dev studio.
I mean,
what do you think?
He should. He should get on that.
Yeah, I mean,
gotta compete in the modern world.
Santa Entertainment has created 6 games, starting with Langrisser Millennium on the Dreamcast, and then Here We Go on iPhone and DS, and then just Gabrielle's games like Ghostly Groove Mini and stuff that So, yeah, pretty fun.
What kind of game is it?
This is a rhythm-based game. Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. This kind of throws us back to our Rhythm Heaven episode that we did with Nico a while back. Gabrielle, she sneezed her soul right out of her body.
Oh, I've been there.
As one tends to do. So she has to go to this place called Monsterville. It's all creepy and spooky and everything, and you just gotta dance your way back to your body, I guess. There's a bunch of songs on it. There's over 30 stages that you can get into, and there's different items and outfits and stuff that you can kind of equip Gabrielle with. So, I don't know, it looks pretty charming. Looks pretty cute. I don't know what the difficulty level is on this in terms of like if it gets harder. Apparently it's a 2-player game, or it can be 2 players, so I don't know. You can still buy it on Amazon. It's like $50. I don't know. You can buy it used too. I don't know.
It's $50 new on Amazon?
Yeah. They're still, I mean, it's a 3DS game, so they still sell 3DS games.
It's over 10 years old. I'm just surprised.
I know. Yeah, no. You can still buy PSP games brand new. I just bought Metal Gear, whatever it was, for the PSP. It was like $20.
Vengeance?
No, on the PSP, the whatever it's called. The Portable Ops, or what, I can't remember.
Yeah.
One of the Metal Gear games.
Ghost Eater. Or
something. No. Ghost Eater? Isn't that Pac-Man?
Metal Gear Pac-Man.
Colonel, I'm waka-wakaing all over the place. I just can't seem to find the ghosts.
Jeez.
Snake, don't come at me. I'm a ghost. I don't know. Takane Okubo started off doing music for Jinmu Densho on the TurboGrafx 16. Did a bunch of random stuff like Zombie Nation on the NES, Color Wars on the TurboGrafx CD, Mario and Wario, I think it's a Super Famicom exclusive for that one. I think it may even be a Satellaview
Mario
game.
And Wario?
Mario and Wario, yes. Which is weird because there was a Nintendo Power issue that was a Mario and Wario comic. Had a Mario and Wario comic in it, yeah. But that was Game Freak, actually. They developed it.
Okay.
But must have not stayed with Game Freak that long, because then they worked on other stuff, random stuff. Space Squash for the Virtual Boy, Wrecking Crew 98 for the Super NES, which I didn't even know there was a Wrecking Crew for the Super NES. That's pretty wild. Yeah. Might even be also a Satellaview game, but who knows. Gekibo 2 on the PS2, just like a bunch of random stuff before they settled on their 2 final games. Gabrielle's Ghostly Groove Monster Mix, which was a Wii game, I think of a similar nature, and then the fully 3DS release that came out in 2011 that we're talking about right now. Okay. So that was our final game as far as that goes. So, yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, but now you're going to close us out with a couple of Harvest Moon jams.
Yeah, so we're going to first go with Harvest Moon 3D, A New Beginning. This came out in the 3DS in 2012. The track is called Summer Theme, and it was composed by Kumi Tanioka. and that was Summer Theme from Harvest Moon 3D, A New Beginning. It came out in the 3DS in 2012 and was composed by Kumi Tanioka.
What would you call that instrument that sounds like a harmonica, but it's not a harmonica? It's like a baby harmonica. It's
like the main melody?
Yeah,
I think that was meant to be a harmonica, like a synth mini harmonica.
Very Mario-ish. In that aspect. It's very relaxing, very chill.
Maybe an accordion, actually.
Oh, maybe.
Could be an accordion.
No, but I did like this, but I will say that I get a very ocean beach kind of vibe from this one.
So full disclosure, while we didn't have any call-ins or take any requests for this episode, I did source this one from my wife. She, as I mentioned, is very into the Harvest Moon games, and she overheard us talking about what we were going to be doing for this episode.
She was super excited.
She was super excited.
Yeah.
So we talked about, her favorite games, and the thing was she really likes the games, but she never really paid attention to the music much, so I was like, well, is there anything that you can remember?
That's kind of my thing, lady.
Yeah. Like that's kind of what we tend to focus on.
Right.
So she went kind of back through the soundtrack and found the one that she remembers enjoying the most from the game, and this was it. I can see why. It's very, very bright, very cheerful. I found this one to be very uplifting, and I really loved the super heavy bass slap on there.
Yeah.
Just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
It was kind of bumping and grooving. Without that, I think it still would have been a good song, but that really added like a nice extra level of fun to this whole thing.
Yeah, I can agree with you there. So this is one of the first 3D Harvest Moon games?
Well, it's definitely the first 3DS Harvest Moon game.
Okay.
One of the other reasons that I went with this one is it's the last entry in the franchise that's released on the 3DS. So it's not the first 3D game.
Ah, okay.
It's actually the last one on the 3DS, and it's also one of the last ones that was developed by Marvelous. So the Harvest Moon series, as I mentioned, started back in 1996 on the Super Nintendo and was developed by Amicus, published by Natsume in North America, Nintendo in Europe, and Pac-In Video in Japan. But Natsume, I guess they must have had the rights to the name or something, because they continued putting out games that were more or less the same with different developers. So Marvelous AQL came in and they did a number of the games like in the middle of the Harvest Moon franchise timeline wise, and they also did some of the most popular Harvest Moon games,
and they were all pretty well reviewed in terms of like amongst Harvest Moon fans.
Yep. And so the problem comes with the more recent games, which we'll get to one of those. Music's not bad, but we'll get to one of those after this. Without Marvelous AQL, Natsume, they went to another developer called Appci, APPCI.
Okay. Appci?
Appci?
I don't know.
They've been doing some of the more recent ones, and they have not been as well reviewed.
Right.
They kind of lack some of the flair that the previous games had, and that's because Marvelous AQL they couldn't take the name Harvest Moon, but they took what they were making and called it Story of Seasons, because I think it was actually called Story of Seasons in Japan.
Oh, okay.
It was released differently. This whole thing, like, again, my wife knows this whole story.
Should have brought your wife on.
We should have. But Marvelous and Natsume kind of split ways, and Marvelous continued making Story of Seasons games that were very much like the old Harvest Moon games. So fans of those games kind of jumped from the Harvest Moon ship to the Story of Seasons ship as things are coming out.
Ultimately, what this boils down to is the developer was like, hey, we're giving all this money to Natsume to publish these games. Why don't we just publish them? So they became their own publisher for the Harvest Moon series, but because Natsume owned the license of the name, they couldn't name their games Harvest Moon. So instead they called them Story of Seasons, and we're like, well, big ups to you, like, peace out, Cub Scout, and they started releasing their own games. Meanwhile, Natsume is like, oh, they were our, like, money maker. You know, like, what are we going to do now? Well, we'll just continue the Harvest Moon series, hoping that nobody knows that the developer is missing or is not the same developer. We'll just hire some third party or whatever. Ultimately, I got to say, is probably going to be Natsume Inc.'s downfall. they haven't really put out much. More recently, they've been kind of falling back on Atari Natsume's releases, which we'll get into in either the third or the potentially fourth volume of Natsume's story. So
Kumi Tanioka, she has been doing all sorts of things since 1998's The Fallen Angels. She did sound on that. She did music composition in Chocobo's Dungeon 2 on the PlayStation 98, which is really cool, and has been attached to a number of Final Fantasy things, side stories, specifically Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, and a lot of the spin-offs or expansions or whatever they are. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, she's attached as music and arrangement for all of those, from 2003 on the GameCube to 2009 Crystal Chronicles The Crystal Bearers on the Wii. Mario Sports Mix on the Wii in 2010. Theatrhythm, Final Fantasy Curtain Call, great game, Nintendo 3DS in 2014. Most recently, she is listed as doing music for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity on the Switch in 2020.
Pretty cool stuff. Not heard much of their stuff, in all honesty, but I dug this. It's cool.
Yeah. All right.
All right, what are we closing out with?
Yeah, we're going to close out with a game called Harvest Moon One World. This came out on most things in 2019, PC, PS4, Switch, Xbox One. The track is called Childhood Home, and the composer on this is Tsukasa Tawada. Okay, that was Harvest Moon One World. Came out on most things that existed in 2019.
Yes.
The track was called Childhood Home, and it was composed by Tsukasa Tawada.
Cool. Very chill. I love the like playground kind of vibes with the xylophone.
Yep.
Very chill, very cool. I'm assuming that most of the music is very much like this in Harvest Moon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I thought this was kind of the cutest track that I heard off the soundtrack, so I picked this one because of that. But they're still trying to do the same thing with music that they'd done in previous games. You know, there was seasonal music, and then there was music for different locations, and you know the mixture of those, or the changing of certain instruments or prominence of certain instruments from one version to another. But this one, I just thought this track was pretty cool, pretty cute, and the track being called Childhood Home probably colored my thoughts. But closing my eyes and listening to this, I kind of was brought back to a time long ago as a child, in my room with my toys and stuff. So I thought it was a nice composition and a really cool track.
You were dead on, by the way, regarding Story of Seasons being called that in Japan. So from 96 to 2013, Harvest Moon was called Story of Seasons in Japan. When it came over to Natsume in terms of them developing it and, really hiring Apathy to develop it, but them basically owning the rights to the Harvest Moon name. It goes completely split 2014 onwards. It's known as Harvest Moon. So,
yeah. Because now those games in Japan are known as Harvest Moon, whereas Story of Seasons has always been Story of Seasons.
Right. It's kind of wild that they can just like take the core of the game and everything and just be like, well, this is ours now, even though you make it, but we're the publishers on the game.
They didn't really take the core of the game. They took the name, and I think they took the... what do you call it? Like the style? Like
that's what I mean. Like farm simulator games.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, because I was going to say the games play similarly, but they play differently now.
Yeah.
You can tell that something changed.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it's kind of confusing for fans, too, because if you're just going into it playing Harvest Moon for the sake of like, oh, this is the franchise that I've been playing for, the past over a decade or whatever. Then you jump in and you play one of the newer games. You're like, whoa, wait a minute, what? This isn't as good. Like, this is what happened. So unless you really know the backstory of this, I think that Natsume is kind of relying on fans to kind of turn a blind eye and just be like, hey, this is the Natsume, the Harvest Moon you grew up with, dude. Like, check it out.
Yeah. And that all started in 2014.
Yeah.
So Harvest Moon: The Lost Valley is the name of the first game in the series that did not have Marvelous attached to it. Or that was, Natsume's own sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then you have Harvest Moon: Seeds of Memories, Sky Tree Village, Light of Hope, Mad Dash, One World, and upcoming The Winds of Anthos. That's set to release in 2023.
It's worth noting, too, that regarding Story of Seasons, it was created by Yasuhiro Wada, and development on the game started with Amicus in 96, and then Victor Interactive took it over from 97 to 2001, and then Marvelous took it over from 2003 until currently.
Yes.
So I don't know if there was a situation where like those development companies turned into Marvelous, like Victor became, like Amicus became Victor, then became Marvelous. I'm not sure about that, but Victor worked with Pack and Video, I guess. They merged to become Victor Interactive. And then I guess Victor Interactive became or was acquired by Marvelous. So that's kind of how I think it all went down. Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, when they merged, they took the rights to that game over. So that became theirs. So that's why they're able to transition from dev company to dev company, because they're getting bought out.
Right.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, so I don't know anything about Amicus because I don't have, like, it doesn't...
I think they just made the first game, but again, I think they just were bought out by Victor.
They're only listed as 1996.
Yeah,
so that's fair.
Probably what happened was it was created by Mr. Wada, and then it was then moved over to Altus, over to Victor. Victor got bought out, and so on and so forth. Interesting history on this one. I gotta say, I think Natsume Inc. is in trouble, and I think that's why they're relying on their older franchises from Natsume Co. Limited, that is now Atari Natsume. Yeah. So
you think they're gonna turn into just making pachinko games?
They're not gonna pull a Konami. No, I think what Natsume is going to end up being is they're gonna continue releasing games until largely the public finds out that, oh, wait a minute, this isn't Harvest Moon, only in name. And when that happens, they're going to lose some major sales if that's something that's going to happen. I don't know what they're releasing modern-wise. I really didn't see a lot in terms of games. I think they published a Godzilla game on PS4. Otherwise, they really are just sticking with what they know, which is this new Harvest Moon thing created by this third party. So I don't know, but I will say this. Any Natsume game that I see now for a modern release is tied to some sort of old franchise, like through Atari Natsume. So I got to bank on them relying on nostalgia at this point to sell games.
Yeah.
And Atari Natsume is a very small company. I mean, we're talking like a very minimal, group of classic developers, one of which is Hiroyuki Watsuki on sound. So I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for Natsume, but we know what the future holds for, what we're going to be talking about next time, we cover Natsume. So now this composer is working for that third party, I assume.
Tsukasa Towada started out doing sound as Towada in Druid on the NES in 1988. Maniac Mansion, music and sound effects in 1988 on the NES.
They were 100% a Jaleco employee. Most likely, because all these early games like Wampum, Fortified Zone, they're all Jaleco games, published by Jaleco, and possibly developed by, in some cases.
Well, Dragon Quest VI Mabaroshi no Daichi in 1995 on the SNES, they did sound design.
Okay, so jumped over to Enix.
But yeah, and then it looks like they did a lot of sound design for a number of Dragon Warrior games.
Yeah.
And then in 2003, Pokemon Coliseum, they were the music director. So they did a lot of music directing from 2003 onward. Oh, I played this on Nintendo 3DS in 2014, Pokemon Battle Troze.
So the reason why they're working on all this weird stuff, like, you know, jumping from Pokemon to Dragon Quest, like, they worked for a company called Genius Sonority Inc. And they were a Tokyo-based developer, and they did all these games that we're talking about. Dragon Quest Swords, which actually, I think Dragon Quest Swords was done by somebody else, like Manami Matsume or something like that. Pokemon Troze, Pokemon Coliseum was their first game, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, you know, all these Pokemon games, as well as some of the Dragon Quest games too. So yeah, that's the reason why we're seeing like a weird mix between like Dragon Quest and, you know, Dragon Warrior and all this other stuff. Like, you know,
interesting.
So, yeah, kind of neat.
Yeah, their last credit is this game, Harvest Moon One World in 2021.
Yes.
Which I have 2019 down here, so 2021 might have been a later release.
Yeah, it might have been, you know, released like on the Xbox or something like that, or Switch or whatnot. So cool.
Yeah, so that about does it for this part 2. There's definitely more to the story.
Yes.
But it'll take us a few months to get there.
Yeah. We'll come back, swing back around to cover some really awesome like stuff from like Mizutani, Hiroyuki Iwatsuki probably, Kinuyo Yamashita. I'm sure we're going to cover all those composers again because a lot of their work was done on Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. They did some work on some newer systems as well. And then we'll kind of swing back around for Atari Natsume's kind of nostalgia-fueled game development. So, yeah, be an interesting discussion. I hope you guys are enjoying the Natsume deep dive. So I know I certainly am, and I think Justin is too.
Learning a lot.
Yeah. All right, what were your favorite tracks? Public. My favorite track. Should I go first? No, I'm going to let Justin go. I usually let Justin go.
I mean, I really like that hole-in-one golf track. This is an Iku Mizutani jam, I know. But I have to say the Hamtaro Ham Challenge, your Bijou's mixed juice salad, mixed juice stand, was really cute. Like I expected it when I heard the name. Like I totally expected the song to sound like that, but I was pleasantly surprised by the song itself.
I'm going with your hole-in-one golf track, your Mizutani jam. That totally surprised me. Great stuff. Other than that, I don't know. I really like that Highway 2000 track.
I was just going to say, and that intro is great.
And The Legend of River King 2 is also really good, too. And Gabriel's Ghostly Groove is super fun. Yes, I love that, too. That was great. So we picked some classics. We picked some good stuff. A lot of different stuff. And a lot of different types of games, too. Natsume released not just farming sims, but, you know, a lot of wacky stuff. So, cool. So we'd like to take a moment to thank our Patreon patrons, without whom this show's continued improvement would be impossible. They are Cam Worma, Jordan and Anson Davis, Rage Cage, Kung Fu Carlito of the Heroes 3 podcast, Scott McElhone, Chris Myers, Scott Brackett, Brad Austin, Chris Murray, Llama Adam, Marcus Stewart, Nick Davis, and Ryan McPherson.
If you would like to become a patron, you can sign up at patreon.com/XVGM Radio. There you can see the different tiers as well. Just $1 gets you a thank you at the end of the show and access to our monthly live shows.
You can visit our website, xvgmradio.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and learn more about your hosts, as well as any of our guests or composers that we've had on the show.
If you'd like to reach out to us, you can always email us at xvgmradio@gmail.com.
If you've liked what you've heard, please consider giving us a review on iTunes.
You can join our Facebook group and chat with other VGM lovers at facebook.com/groups/xvgmradio, where we talk about everything from current game news to sharing awesome VGM tracks, or just talking about the podcast itself.
You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle on both of those sites is @XVGM Radio.
If you don't have any other social media or just want to try something unique, check us out on our Discord group chat. Links will be in the show notes.
All right, Justin, in 1 month, we are coming back with another episode. But before we talk about that, we have some quick announcements for stuff that's coming out.
Yes. So we are in the month of June. So this episode should be coming out on the 21st of June, which means that just the day previous, on the 20th of June, we would have done our XVGM After Dark. If you missed it, go check out the VOD on twitch.tv/shock83j16. We listened to Banjo and Kazooie Rejiggered. That was something that I picked up at Retro World Expo this past year.
Yes.
And those soundtracks have great music.
Grant Kirkhope.
Yeah, so go check that out. But coming up on the 30th of June is going to be our Patreon live show. So we did end up missing the one in May. We had some complications from every angle you can possibly imagine that we just kind of had to cancel that one. But this month we are on. The patrons are picking a theme. If you haven't voted, it's too late at this point. But it will be one of the following:
either sand, meaning games with sand in them, games we're playing, or launch titles.
Yep.
So it is up to everyone to pick. If you're a patron, you can go onto our Patreon and pick, although the picking is over at this point. Right. So you will hear on the 30th what you chose.
Well, I mean, you will hear the selections from what you chose.
Yes.
We'll know the results of the poll, I think, on the 14th. Currently, Sand is winning, so we'll see what happens on the 14th.
Yeah.
And then next month, in the month of July, we will be coming back to listen to and talk about pinball video games.
Yeah, video pinball. This is actually your suggestion, and I love the suggestion. I think it's really cool. I mean, off the top of my head, there's so many amazing pinball video game soundtracks. So getting to explore them is something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. And just, talking about good old pinball times.
Oh, yeah. Good times. All right. Well, then we'll see you in a month. This is Mike.
And Justin.
Signing off for XVGM Radio. Record of Lotus War 2000 Highway 2000. This came out in I almost said 2000. No.